Good morning. This is Amy Black, Executive Director of the ASA Education Foundation, and welcome to the ASA Women in Industry Division webinar, Handling Difficult Conversations in Performance Management. During today's session, your mic will be muted. However, you will be able to send questions to Doug at any time during his presentation using the question box at the right-hand side of your screen. We will then read those questions to Doug so he can answer them. Today's presentation is also being recorded and will be available for viewing within the next few days on your My ASA page at asa.net. All right, let's get started. Our presenter today is Doug Dillon. He is the Director of Professional Development here at ASA Education Foundation. His responsibilities include elevating the people development capabilities of ASA member organizations and driving performance management, leadership development, and learning management. He has also served as Director, Talent Management for First Supply, a Midwest-based plumbing, heating, and industrial PVF distributor. Prior to that, he was Director of Global Sales, Learning, and Development for the Kohler Company, a global plumbing manufacturing organization where he served for nearly 10 years. His responsibilities included learning, sales strategy development, succession planning, and process improvement for the sales function. Among his credentials, Doug is a Master Certified Facilitator for an industry-leading leadership curriculum and holds certifications in more than a dozen curricula. He has spoken at international conventions for the Association for Talent Development and the International Society for Performance Improvement. In this morning's sessions, Doug will share the crucial steps that should occur before, during, and following a performance management discussion for productive results. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Doug. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks, Amy, and welcome to everyone. Thanks for inviting me to come back and share some insights on performance management. I was pleased that our session in March for the Women in Industry organization went well when we talked about goals, and throughout this particular session we'll review some of that content as well, because when we think about handling difficult conversations in performance management, so much of it can be righted before we even get there in the goal setting process. So let's jump right in and talk through a little bit of in the past we had our achieving success in performance management by effective goal setting. This happened in early March, and the recording for this particular webinar is available for any ASA member to download and listen to. So if you happen to miss the session in March and are interested in this content, feel free to go to the ASA website and download this. At the end of this webinar, I will share with you the exact location for that, as well as where this one will be located. Today we're talking about the difficult conversations piece, and there will be a third one coming up in September. It continues our series on performance management, but it's going to focus on career development and how to broach that particular subject within the confines of the performance management or the employee review cycle. So I look forward to speaking with you again in September. Throw that on your calendar, or make sure that you let other people know who you think might be interested in that particular discussion. So for today, we're going to talk about handling the difficult conversations. So you know, whenever performance management comes up, there's always the possibility to have a tough conversation with someone. And to be able to do this, I want to be able to share some things with you, but I also want to open it up for some discussion. So for those of you today who are connecting their audio piece to the webinar via a telephone, if you would, you've been assigned an audio pin. And if you would, go ahead on your telephone and hit star your audio pin that you've been assigned to, pound your audio pin and pound again. And what that will do is it will connect your video version on the GoToWebinar piece with your audio. If you are receiving your audio through your computer already through voice over IP, you don't need to do this. Only if you've been assigned an audio pin through the system and you're connecting your audio through your telephone. What we're going to do is, after we get through some of the concepts, we're going to have an opportunity to open it up for some discussion. And I'd love to be able to see what those of us on the call have had to say on this. So if you have a thought, or you want to be able to participate, all you need to do is simply raise your hand. And there is the little hand button that should be located on the left-hand side of the nav tools next to your little name that will allow you to raise your hand. Our producer extraordinaire, Mr. Chris Olson, also known as the voice from God, will be able to recognize you and would love to be able to hear some of your thoughts as you perhaps have had some challenging behaviors that you've had to deal with in the past with performance management. It's always good to be able to hear from other people and how perhaps you've gone through your process as well. So let's do a little test of this right now. Let's have everyone raise their hand or click that little button so that we can see who is raising their hand. Looks like a couple of people already, 5, 6, 7 of us are raising our hand. Excellent, good job. It looks like we've been able to find that. If for some reason you're not able to locate your raised hand, go ahead and send us a question or a chat by opening your chat function, and Chris Olson will reach out to you to be able to help with that. We want to be able to make sure that everyone has that opportunity to participate. So, the key to success that I have found in handling difficult conversations in performance management is not rocket science. It does take some hard work, and obviously preparation is going to be the key. So there's a couple of things that you can consider as you walk into your performance management discussions. Some you may suspect are going to be difficult, and others you may not know is difficult, but it may end up being difficult. So let's take a look at a couple of things. We talked about this in March. The first thing to do is to write solid, measurable goals at the beginning of the year. I can't tell you how important this piece is in the process. Not only is it going to make performance management go better for you, but it'll help you to stymie some of those tougher conversations. If your goals are written well, if they are measurable, if they have some pieces to it that you can fall back on, you will be able to unemotionally have that conversation and shift that more difficult part of the discussion into something that is much easier. So if you haven't looked at your goals for 2015 for a few months, now is a perfect time to be able to do it. Some of you are going to be entering a mid-year evaluation cycle in the next couple of weeks, and prior to doing that, it is so critical that you review those goals to make sure that they are as you want them to be, whether you are your individual goals or if you are a manager for your individuals. It is so important. The next piece in preparation for this is to inspect along the way. So if you decide or if you see as a manager that there is a direct report of yours that potentially is gearing up for a tough conversation, it's important to be able to have some of those conversations with them along the way. Don't wait until the performance management conversation is scheduled to do that. Have some of those more casual conversations that lead up to that so that you can be prepared for that, you can understand where they're coming from, and you can help to guide along the way. The third element in preparation, and this is any HR person's dream and probably first recommendation to managers, is to keep track of your progress and shortfalls along the way. Make sure you're guiding your direct reports if they are meeting expectations, exceeding expectations, or even falling short of expectations along the way, but to document that so that you have some hard and clear facts. And when I share with you the process coming up, you'll see where that dovetails quite nicely and how critical and important it is for you to be keeping track along the way. The next piece is to take time to prepare your end of the year comments. This is one where I think many managers feel that, well, you know, my conversations is scheduled. I'm just going to write up a couple of things real quick right before that discussion, have the discussion, and then it'll be done. Well, if you're anticipating difficult conversations in that discussion. The more time you take to prepare up front, the more prepared you're going to be. Think through some things like, I wonder what they're going to say to this, or when I present this, I wonder what their reaction is going to be. And the more you think through that, the more you get some counsel or coaching from other people, the better off you're going to be in handling that at the time that it occurs. So make sure that you're preparing and you take the time. Think through some responses and anticipated challenges that you might get from people. You could probably think of all different kinds of things that your individual managers will hear and that you could hear as a manager from your direct reports. But if you think through some of those things and you prepare how you could respond to them, again, in an unemotional way, you'll be able to get through that discussion a little bit easier. And obviously have that discussion in person. This is pretty much table stakes in my mind, and even though it may be difficult if you have direct reports that don't reside in the same geographic location or branch that you are, it's still important to be able to schedule time when the two of you can be together and do this face-to-face. You'll be able to collect some of the nonverbals, to be able to see some of those, and to be able to respond much better. So in general, the focus needs to be on preparation. But even when you do prepare, difficult things can happen. You can very easily get people who are going to be challenging for you. They're going to respond in a negative way, even if it's not an overt way. They're going to have difficulties with what you're telling them. And you need to be able to, oh boy, that guy's really angry there, isn't he? You're going to need to be able to deal with some emotion that comes up. That's simply the nature of being a manager, is figuring out a way that even though you're prepared for these things, they still may have a very negative reaction. About 10 years ago, I had a direct report that lived out of the country in which I was. He did not reside in the United States, and English was obviously his second language. And I knew that it was going to be a tough conversation because of the 5 different items that I needed to review him on. 3 of the 5 he had missed. They were very objective. We did a nice job up front of building in what those good measurements were going to be, but we had geographic challenges, we had cultural issues, in addition to the way that I measured things might be different from the way that he measured things, and it was a very tough discussion to be able to get through. So as much as you prepare, there's still going to be times when you can have some challenging behaviors. And obviously there's going to be a time when you need to get some help with this. So here's a couple of things that I'm going to suggest that you walk through if you get that. And we're going to do some examples of these and have some discussion. So the first part of this particular process is we want to be able to convey our positive intent. We want to be able to tell the person that I'm here to be able to help. I'm here to be able to get past this and get through whatever emotion you're having at this particular time so that we can focus on something positive. You need to be able to get yourself as the manager on the same side of the table as they are. The next part of the process is to describe specifically what you have observed, not a second hand, but something that you have observed, and make it be as objective as you possibly can. I heard you say this. When you did this, this was the result of that. When this didn't happen, or these were the sales numbers, but your goal was that plus X, and you failed to hit those. You need to be able to describe exactly what that situation is. Okay? The next piece of that, and this is one that many people miss, is you need to state the impact of that. This provides the so what. So now it's not just that, oh, I didn't get my reports in by the due date that I needed to. Because in the mind of the employee, they may be shrugging their shoulders and saying, well, so what? Big deal. But if you're able to state the impact that when you're late with this particular form, it causes a domino effect for the next person, because the next person needs to take all of the reports from all of the people that have your same job title and do something with it. When one person is late, it causes everything to be late. So you need to be able to figure out a way to state what the negative impact is so that they can context what they have seen in step number 2. In step number 4, you want to be able to ask the person to respond. So we need to make this be a two-way conversation, and we need to put that listening hat on. And then the last thing that we want to do is focus the discussion on solutions. So we don't want to just leave it there with some big yucky mess that they just dumped on the table because they've vented themselves in step number 4. But we want to take that information, and after you've listened to it, we want to be able to guide. And that's the important part of this process. So let's take a kind of a deep dive in each one of these steps. Let's move into the next piece where we can decide what we want to do with each of these. I'll give some examples on things that we can do, but in this first step of convey your positive intent, we want to actually know that our intent, our goal is to help them. We want to support them as opposed to chastise them in this piece, and we really want to set a positive tone for this. Look, I'm not here to beat you up. That's not the goal of this process. You've obviously missed this particular expectation. We had a goal to achieve X, and we simply didn't do that. But my goal is to help us focus on getting past this. We need to be able to figure out how we can have a different conversation around this particular goal next year. My goal is to be able to help. That's what we want to convey in this particular one, the positive intent. The next part of this is to describe specifically what we have observed. And this will help to be able to provide a personal ownership for the other individual on this particular goal. We want to make sure that we focus on just the facts, ma'am, and to make it as unemotional as we can. Okay, describing exactly what you saw can take some of the emotion out of it, as opposed to throwing in descriptions or innuendo or things that are beyond what the actual observation is. Okay, but there's a challenge with this, and now is the time where we're going to open this up for some discussion, because time out. What if you haven't actually observed the behavior yourself? You know, the model says that you have to describe exactly what you have observed, but there may be times when we haven't actually observed the behavior itself. So let's open it up now. Those of you who have got some suggestions on what you can do if you haven't actually observe the behavior yourself, but to get as close as you possibly can when you're having the discussion to be objective and measurable and unemotional. So those of you who have some thoughts on this particular piece, go ahead and click your raise hand button, and we will unmute you so that you can share what your thoughts are. Who's got a thought on what you can do if you haven't actually observed the behavior yourself? So we've got some shy people that aren't wanting to raise their hand right now. Maybe we should actually call on people. I wonder how that would work. Oh, funny. Look at all these people that are now becoming unavailable things. All right, well, be thinking about this. I'm going to share with you a couple of my thoughts on this, and we'll continue to look for someone who would like to participate and raise their hand. One thing that you can do if you haven't actually observed it is try to replicate the situation so that you can observe in the future. So let's say you have a salesperson that has not met the expectations on the role of their job, or perhaps they're falling on their closing skills. Maybe they're getting to a point with customers who are walking into the showroom, or an outside sales rep is pumping out plenty of proposals, but they're not actually being able to close it. So one thing that you can do is attempt to replicate that. So perhaps you as the manager go on some ride-alongs and attempt to see it for yourself. So maybe you haven't seen what's happened in the past, but you attempt to be able to recreate something in the future to be able to do that. Perhaps you're getting feedback on customer service from someone, that you're getting some complaints from customers that someone is rude or they're not being pretty focused on customer service. You haven't observed it, but you're getting feedback from customers. So again, attempt to replicate that situation. Maybe you sit with them and observe them on the phone with some customers and get the opportunity to listen to them as they interact with other customers so that you can say that you have personally witnessed some of the things. That's one way that you can do it. Another way is to get very specific data from others who did. So perhaps it's a peer manager of yours, or perhaps it's a customer or someone outside of the organization, maybe a vendor or a rep agency person. Get some very specific data from them about the individual so that you can speak as intelligently and as factually as you possibly can. It's not always possible to see, but you certainly can get some additional information from other people. And certainly collect and familiarize yourself with as many of the details as you possibly can. You want to be able to know what has happened, all of the different innuendo and all of the different pieces relative to that. So that's an opportunity for you to educate yourself and do some preparation in advance. Okay? So that's what you should do if you haven't actually observed it. The third step, as we talked about, is to state the impact of the behavior. We want to do the so what. We want to make sure that the individual understands the downstream implications of that. So maybe I'm a little bit short with customers on the phone. Okay, I get it, but what's the big deal? Well, if we continue to be that way, our customers are going to go to the competition. Or if we continue to fall short in our closing skills, we will be spinning our wheels. Our customers are going to use our great services and find our products and purchase them from someone else, and ultimately our organization and you as a salesperson will fail if we don't figure out what's going on with your closing skills. We need to add some weight and urgency for a change. We need to be able to tell them that this isn't just happening in a vacuum, that it impacts other things, and we have to have the opportunity to plug that particular skill gap. Okay? And this is really, I think I mentioned this before, this is one of the most forgotten elements, because it's so easy to say that, oh, you failed at this, or I saw when you did this and it was wrong, or it was bad. Okay, we need to be able to add the so what to it. We need to add the impact statement. And if you don't add it, your ability to get a behavior change at some point in the future is significantly reduced. So make sure that you are adding that impact to your statements as you're talking to your people about that. The next piece is to obviously ask them to respond. We get to give them the microphone. It's their turn to be able to be a part of the dialogue. They need to be able to be heard. We need to give them that opportunity. And oftentimes all they're looking for is for you to listen. Take some notes if you think it's important, but we need to be able to give them the opportunity to share their side or their perspective or what's weighing on their heart at that particular time. So we need to give them that opportunity. After that happens, though, we need to be able to focus the solution. We need to be able to guide them to something that is meaningful, that is positive, that is productive. We need to be focused on action and not just talking about all the reasons why I failed at this particular goal or this particular objective, but this is where they're going to try to derail, or this may be where certain types of individuals will try to get you to focus on something that is emotional or that isn't really the point. And so this is where we need to guide them back to the situation. This was the goal. This was the result of the goal. We fell short. You explained what your side of the story is, but now we need to really focus on what's happening to move forward, or we need to figure out what we can do going forward beyond this piece, and make sure that you stay focused on the most important thing. So we've gone through all 5 of these things right now. Let me take a quick timeout and see if we've got questions, thoughts, comments that people have. Go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to contribute something else at this particular point, or if you've got a question you'd like to add. Okay, seeing none. Let's talk about who controls the discussion in each of these 5 things, because we can do all 5 of these things quite well, but if we don't do them in the right context, or we don't control them or decide on the timing of each of these, it's not going to be as effective as it could be. So let's take that first one, convey positive intent. Who controls this one? Is it me, the manager who's having the conversation, or is it the employee? What's our thought? Who has a thought on who is going to control this particular part of the discussion? Yes, thank you, Sue. Yeah, Sue says, me the manager. You're exactly right. Thank you. You control it. And here's one easy way to know it. We're talking about your positive intent, so obviously you have control over this particular piece. Excellent. This is me. This is my control. I'm going to control the first part. The second one, describe specifically what you have observed. Who controls this particular part of the process? Give you a hint, there's another piece that has you in there, right? Good, thank you again, Sue. Describe specifically what you have observed. So we as the manager are the one who controls this particular element of the process. It's important to know who's controlling each of these, or who's the person who is driving these. Stating the impact of the behavior. Who is the person that controls this one? Is it me, the manager, or is it the employee? That's right. It is definitely me. I'm controlling this part. I am stating the impact. So these are the things that I can prepare in advance. I can state the positive intent, I can describe what I've seen, and I can state the impact. Okay? The next part of it is ask the other person to respond. Who controls this particular part? Yes, the other person is the controller of this, and we give them the microphone. They have the opportunity to share. Now, we want to be able to make sure that we can guide that, but you have to be able to give them the opportunity to do this. And then finally, focus the discussion on solutions. This is a joint ownership. Both us, me, the manager, and the employee get to equally share this particular stage. So if we control really the first 3 sections, and then we hand it over to the individual to control number 4, and then we jointly control number 5, it's important now to talk about how much time should we spend on each one of these. Okay, so we need to be able to focus this on a timing, and it's very important that we do this. So in the first step of convey your positive intent, this is something that I control as the manager. Should I spend a lot of time in this particular area, or should I spend a very little amount? Should I rocket through this like the hare on the left, or should I make this be a longer time period like the tortoise on the right? Who's got some thoughts on this particular piece? Conveying my positive intent. How much time should I spend in this particular section? Who's got a thought on this? Let's see, Joe has a thought on this. Thank you, Joe. Mary, you also have a thought on this. Mary says, let's see, manager, both, manager, oh, these were some previous ones, sorry. It has to be clearly communicated, but then get on with the discussion. Mary, you're right on board. Thank you very much. We want to spend a little amount of time in this. No one wants to hear all of this going on and on and on about this positive intent. We want to state it, we want to be very clear, and then we want to move to the next section. Okay, we don't want to spend 3 years, talking about how I'm so focused on making this a better place and all that kind of stuff. So, 2 or 3 sentences in this area, taking 10 seconds or less, is absolutely sufficient for conveying positive intent. Okay, we don't need to spend tons of time to be able to go through that. How about the second piece? Describe specifically what we have observed. Again, this is our controlling piece. We're controlling this. Here's the hare and the tortoise again. How much time should we spend on this? Should this be something that we spend a lot of time on and be the tortoise and go kind of slow, or is this something that we should be really focused on and get through fairly quickly? What are our thoughts on this particular piece? Who's got a suggestion on a lot of time or a little bit of time? Let's see. Joe, we'll go back to you since we did Mary last time. Yes, you're exactly right. We want to be able to spend a small amount of time. We need to describe what we've observed, but we don't want to go on and on and on and on about this. Maybe some of us have some ill memories of a school teacher or a parent that had the proverbial burlap bag and started dumping all kinds of stuff about how we did this poorly and this poorly and that poorly and all these things. We don't want to overwhelm. We simply want to be very focused and describe what we've observed, and we want to move on. So we want to be the hare in this case again. Good, thanks, Joe. State the impact of the behavior or the action. Okay, again, we control this part. How much time do we want to spend on this? Do we want to rocket through this piece? Do we want to spend a lot of time on this? What do you think? Who's got some thoughts on how little or how much time should we spend on this particular section? Who's got some thoughts? Well, I'll give it to you. This is another one where we don't want to spend a whole lot of time. We want to rocket through this one as much as we possibly can, or as succinctly as we can as well. We don't want to go overboard. We don't want to talk all kinds of stuff about this is going to happen if you continue and this is going to happen. We want to be very succinct. We want to get through it, a couple of sentences, 10 to 15 seconds, and then move on to the next piece. And what is that next piece again? Oh yes, ask the other person to respond. We don't control this part, they do. How much time do we want to spend on this particular section? Okay, now it may be a scary thing to think about, but we do want them to respond, and we don't want to be seen to cut them off. We want to give them the opportunity to share their perspective. So if they need some extra time to be able to do that, if 10 to 15 seconds is simply not enough for them to do that, then let them continue. We shouldn't want to be, cutting them off, and we need to be able to get their thoughts and their feelings, and many of them may not have many. They may be pretty short, but we want to give them the opportunity to share their thoughts, and if that takes some extra time, then so be it. Okay. The last piece, focus the discussion on solution. This is the one with the joint ownership of ourselves and our employee. What is our thought on how much time to place on this? This is another one where we want to make sure that we spend enough time giving the opportunity to go do some back and forth and figure out what we want to do going forward on this. So be okay with spending a little bit extra time on this. So let's review. Handling those difficult conversations. We want to convey our positive intent. We want to describe specifically what we've seen. We want to state the impact that we've got. We want to make sure that we ask that person to respond. And we want to make sure that we focus on the discussion or the solution. So obviously those are the pieces. We want to be able to bring them to life now. So let's do an example. A live example. We get to do it and actually have a discussion and see how this model plays out. So here's Cody. Cody is our best buddy. He's a warehouse worker. And Cody is not really excited about participating in the performance management process. You know, maybe he is like some people in your particular branch or your area where this isn't the top of his food chain. This isn't the thing that he looks forward to most in life, is to have that employee review discussion with this manager, but it is what it is, and Cody, as a member of our organization where we do performance management, needs to participate in this. So we're going to be Cody's manager, and we're going to prepare for a discussion with Cody. Now, one of his annual performance goals is keep your area of the warehouse clean. Now, those of you who participated in our session in March, we know that this is not a very good goal for Cody to have. But fortunately, you've either participated in that webinar or you've reviewed the previous session, the recorded version of it, and you were very proactive and you didn't have this as a performance expectation. In fact, you've modified this to make it much better. So now Cody has a different goal. It's similar, but it is to maintain the cleanliness standard in your zone in the warehouse. So what this assumes is that there is a written standard that anyone can point to, whether that's in an operations manual or an employee handbook or whatever it is. It makes the assumption that Cody has been assigned a zone in the warehouse, so maybe that is 2 or 3 or 4 different aisles of the warehouse. That is his responsibility, and he knows about that. In addition, we have some measurements. Again, we've talked about this in the last session. Perhaps one of the measurements is to have 0 clutter on the floors in your zone by end of shift each day. Another measurement is to have the floors swept weekly. And we're going to measure that by random spot checks by the manager. That would be us. Okay, so this was a performance management goal with measurements that were established for Cody at the beginning of the year. We now have an opportunity to review Cody at the end of the year to be able to give him some feedback. So let's see how those random spot checks did over the past year. So we took the opportunity to do some spot checks 6 times during the year. On February 15th, that spot check was just fine. On April 3rd, oh my gosh, there was an accident. In fact, a hand truck ran over some clutter in one of Cody's aisles and it caused some product damage. That product happened to fall off of the hand truck as a coworker of Cody's hit some of the garbage that was on the floor, and it caused some breakage on a piece of product. April 22nd, the owner happened to be doing a tour with some people in the community, and there was an overflowing trash bin that you as the manager had to get the brunt of the displeasure from the owner, because that was something that everybody saw when they came through as a tour in Cody's zone. June 8th, there was a spot check that was okay. On October 3rd, there were some empty boxes and trash was visible on the floor after the shift end. And on December 13th, we did a spot check and it was just fine. Okay, so these are the things that we've observed. We've done the homework. We've completed our spot checks. We have some very hard and fast record. We have what happened on the job. Now, our particular organization uses a 5-point Likert scale to measure performance. Yours may be slightly different from this. You may use a 4-point model, or you may have different definitions of what each of these things are, but a 1 would be below expectations, did not meet the expectations. 2 is approaches. 3, they fully met the expectations. 4 would be above expectations, and a 5 would be significantly exceeds the expectations. So if we go back to what actually happened, 3 of the 6 spot checks by us were okay, and 3 of them were not up to standard, and there was an accident that occurred as a result of this. So I think it's pretty fair to say that the appropriate score or rating for Cody in this particular area should be below expectations. His performance simply did not meet the expectations that was set forth for him at the beginning of the year to maintain the cleanliness standard in your zone of the warehouse. Okay, so you're preparing for this discussion with Cody. You know exactly what you're going to rate him, and you have scheduled your conversation with him. So in the actual live presentation, what you want to do with him is you want to ask him, so Cody, how do you think you did this year on this particular goal? And you want to give Cody the opportunity to respond to this. Now, let's assume, because the title of this webinar is Handling Challenging Situations, let's assume that Cody is not going to be all that happy and is going to have some challenging behaviors here. Now, the interesting thing and the good thing is that I happen to have a 13-year-old son at home. So it's very easy for me to envision what something is that someone like Cody could say because I have one living in my home. So let's pretend that Cody says, yeah, I think I did fine or whatever. Okay, that's what actually comes out of his mouth when you say, so Cody, how did you think you did this year on this goal? Yeah, I think I did fine or whatever. Okay, so now you know that you've rated him below expectations. He thinks he is fine. So now we have the opportunity to use this model. You've got some challenging behaviors that you're going to need to manage. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is convey our positive intent. We want to be able to share something to Cody that states what we're trying to accomplish here. Again, it's our focus, we control it, and we want to spend a little amount of time. There's many different ways to do this. Here's one way to do this. So Cody, my job as the manager is to ensure we're all working in a safe environment, especially in the warehouse, so that everyone who comes to work at the beginning of their shift will go home at the end of their shift without being hurt. Okay, that took me, maybe 8 seconds to say, and it states the positive intent of what I'm doing. You can get a flavor for this that if I were to spend more than that, it would be falling on deaf ears. He wouldn't care. He's rolling his eyes. He's like waiting for the shoe to drop, right? But it's important that we start it out in this way to make sure that we start the positiveness. Okay, so that's one way to do it. There are certainly other ways to be able to do it. The next thing that we want to do is fairly quickly describe specifically what we've observed. So, Cody, I recall needing to talk to you 3 times throughout the year about trash, clutter, and product laying in the aisles of your zone. Once, the owner was giving a tour and commented about the overflowing trash bin. And do you remember when that product on Zach's hand truck was damaged when he ran into the discarded shrink wrap in your zone? Those situations cannot happen. Okay? Quick, focused, unemotional, describing specifically what you have observed as an individual. That's one way to say it. Again, there's many other different ways to say it, but it was quick and to the point. Okay? We can't forget about the impact. That's the next piece. One way to state the impact is simply, Cody, when there is clutter, the warehouse operates less efficiently. When product is laying around on the floor, it is much more difficult to locate when a customer actually needs it. We want to take pride in our workplace, and we frequently have vendors, rep agents, customers, and tours in our warehouse. We aren't able to put our best foot forward when it's messy. And worse, when people and forklifts have to swerve around garbage, someone could get hurt. Okay, that's an impact statement. It's pretty powerful. It's a couple of sentences. You can get through it in about 10 seconds or so, but it's important to describe the why. Because in his mind, he may be saying, like my son probably says when I talk to him about picking up the dirty clothes on his floor in his bedroom, who cares? I don't care, Dad, that I've got a bunch of, unkempt jeans thrown on the floor. Cody could be thinking, who cares? It's a couple of boxes. It's not a big deal. But the impact gives him the why I need to care. Okay, we need to make sure that we state the impact. And then we need to ask him to respond. We need to give him the opportunity. We've gone through the first 3 steps pretty quickly. We need to give him the opportunity to respond. And this is where you're going to get the curveballs. It could be that he says, yeah, I get it, whatever, let's move on. Or he could want to argue it with you. Okay, but you need to give him that opportunity to be able to say it. And then finally, when he's finished, focus the discussion on the solutions. So one way that you can do that is, Cody, thanks. I really appreciate your thoughts. So where can we take this conversation so that we have a different outcome next year? Now, you're going to assume that he's probably going to have a very similar goal in his performance management next year. That's not going to go away, but we want to be able to give him the opportunity to discuss how it's going to be a different conversation next year. Another way to say it, because there are multiple ways, what can I do to help make sure that the cleanliness standard stays top of mind for you? Again, you're taking some ownership for that. You're not saying, I'm going to do it for you, but you're trying to be a part of the solution here. What can I do to help make sure that this standard stays top of mind? Okay, that's a great focusing discussion or focusing statement to make sure that the solution is top of mind. Who's got some other thoughts, things that they would like to share, perhaps other statements that they would work with their art, but also within this particular framework or science that you'd like to share? Okay. So as a reminder, the 5 elements are: convey your positive intent, describe specifically what you've observed, state the impact of the behavior or action, ask the other person to respond, and focus the discussion on solution. For those of you who think that there are other people in your organization that may benefit from that particular model, feel free to direct them to the website where in just a few minutes this particular webinar, the recorded version, will be uploaded. And as we mentioned before, September 10th at 10 a.m. Central Time, we'll have our 3rd and final webinar series for the Women in Industry group called Career Development in Performance Management. So we've talked about how to set good goals. We've talked about now how to handle some of the difficult situations. Now we're going to talk about how we integrate some career development discussions within the confines of the employee review process or inside of performance management. So we're excited to be able to provide that to you September 10th. And as I mentioned, the recorded version will be available very shortly. I will leave it open for any questions that people may have beyond to what you've got right now. Let's see. Mr. Producer Extraordinaire, do you have do you see any questions perhaps that I'm not seeing?
I saw one, what do you do with someone that's completely negative?
Oh, good. So someone who's completely negative, thanks, Sue, for sharing with that. I mean, your goal when something like that happens is to be able to guide the discussion as much as you can. And if someone is so focused and hell-bent on being negative, there may not be anything that you can do. But I think making sure that you as the manager are attempting to find a solution by asking some of those questions like, okay, I get that you're very frustrated with this situation. Where should we take this? What do you suggest that we do to be able to relieve this? Or what types of things do you think we should talk about in order to make this be positive? And if they're not able to come up with something there that they can meet you halfway, it may be that they're just going to be negative about this and there's not much to do about it. But most people will be able to see that you're attempting to figure out a way to walk forward, and they'll give you some opportunities with that. Or they may just say, you know what, I'm not sure, Sue, at this point, and you could say, all right, well, why don't you think about it for a while? Why don't we resume this discussion in a day or two after you've had an opportunity to either cool down, if that's the situation, and a lot of people are more analytical and they simply need a little time to process. And that's absolutely okay to defer the discussion, but to pick it up at a later point after they've had a chance to talk about it. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often, but you know as well as I do that there are some people out there that are just going to choose to be negative, and there may not be much that we can do about that.
Hey, Doug. We have another question from Cindy. When you have someone that never takes accountability for their actions and they always find it someone else's fault, how do you handle that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of different things that are out there that helps focus on accountability. And if you have an opportunity to read the Oz Principle, it really focuses on accountability from both a managerial perspective and from an organizational perspective. I highly recommend that particular read. It's a quick read that focuses on accountability. But the easiest way to be able to do it is at the very beginning of the year to write very objective goals and let them understand that at the end of the year we're going to be reviewing you. We're going to be reviewing you against this particular group of goals. It is your responsibility to achieve these goals. We're not going to review so-and-so or someone else who you may point a finger at. We're not going to review the fact that, oh, the economy is really hard right now, so I couldn't hit my numbers. We're going to talk about what your performance was and what you did or didn't do in order to achieve these particular goals. So I think making sure that you have that at the very beginning of the year, so that at the end of the year, when you get all of the finger pointing and you get them not taking accountability, then your discussion is slightly different. You know, Frank, I'm confused. Yeah, I remember having a discussion with you at the beginning of the year when we set out to have these goals. I remember having several conversations with you throughout the year that said, you know, we reminded you that this is the goal. I asked a couple of different times if there were things that I could do to help. We provided you with some e-learning opportunities or some mentoring connections with other people. We had a mid-year discussion with you back last June and reiterated the importance of you being able to achieve this particular goal, and now we're at the end of the year and you haven't achieved it. So I'm confused as to where the disconnect is, that it's not someone else's fault, it's not the economy's fault, it's not this and that. It is your relationship, it is your accountability here. So you can have that type of a discussion if you have stayed on top of it throughout the year. Great question. Other thoughts?
That's the only ones that we have so far.
Okay. Great. We stand ready and willing and able to be able to assist anybody through this process. If you've got additional questions, feel free to give ASA a call, and we'll be happy to talk through anything else that you want. The slides will also be available for you if you care to download them. But thanks so much for your participation. Thanks to the Women in Industry Council for focusing us on a performance management series in this particular year, and I look forward to those who want to participate with us in September. Thank you.